distinguished panelists will delve into key budgetary provisions aimed at boosting agricultural productivity, enhancing rural infrastructure, and how the budget can truly empower our farmers. Let me invite on stage our distinguished guest, Ashok Gulati ji, Distinguished Professor, Indian Council for Research on International Economic Relations, to please join us on the stage. Also, let us put our hands together to welcome Mr. Ajay Vir Jakhar, Chairman, Bharat Krishak Samaj. To moderate this panel, I'll invite on stage Siddharth Zarabi, Managing Editor, Business Today Television. Over to you, Siddharth.
Thank you very much, Sakshi. It's always tough to get a session going right after a tea break. And Professor Gulati and Ajay are veterans of this, and I have that tough task, but I'll request all our floor managers, colleagues to get people in, because this is not only a highly sensitive, emotional and contentious issue, it's something that is far more important than balance sheets of companies. It is the balance sheet of Bharat in some ways. Professor Gulati, there are lots of questions, and Ajay is here as a farmer, so I'm going to take your permission to go to Ajay first as the farmer, because this is the post-budget round table. And Ajay, I come to you. This government came into this budget, it's the first of the third term. 11 budgets, including interim budgets, have already been presented. As a farmer, what do you think of this budget as far as the agriculture sector is concerned?
So, thank you for this opportunity. Lots of people ask me that did the government listen to farmers when they made this budget statement, and I want to put it on record and saying it doesn't seem that they've addressed the issues that farmers have raised. But as a farmer, I take solace in the fact that the government doesn't listen to its own think tanks. It's not listened to Niti Aayog. I think so Ashok Gulati ji gets to meet the Prime Minister. They've not listened to Ashok Gulati ji. They don't listen to eminent people. So as farmers, I take solace in the fact that we are not the only one the government's not listening to. Having said that, there were so many low-hanging fruit that the government could have tackled, for example, on agriculture research and development that Ashok Gulati ji also keeps talking about, where every rupee invested will give you a 10 times return. And the government does not do that. In fact, for 20 years now at least, that's what I can remember, that the investment in research and development has been less than the rate of inflation, which means that the budgeting allocation for research in agriculture and extension services has reduced every year. And I really don't know how they think about it, which also comes to the point ki what is the remit of Niti Aayog? I mean, it's a think tank. Today there's a meeting of Niti Aayog, but I really don't know what they're doing. And lastly, budget is only a balancing of books, but it also gives a vision of the government of what it plans to do in the longer term. And I think it may have balanced the book properly, but it shows to me that the BJP is running behind events. They're firefighting rather than having a vision now, especially with this budget. Okay. And that's what I want to start with.
What Ajay Vir Jakhar has done is to present 3 or 4 major questions. There's no one from the government to answer them, but we'll try and take them in subsequent sessions when we have the budget makers. Professor Gulati, the big question really is, what does this budget contain for the agriculture sector? Because the numbers, viewers, if you look at the agriculture allocation, it's up around 6%. If you take agriculture and rural development together, it's up around 9%. But the big point that, and Ajay didn't say that, I'll say that, there was no hike for PM Kisaan. So the direct benefit transfer program for farmers, for India's Kisaan, has not been hiked in this budget. With that backdrop, sir, your first comment.
Well, let me start with the positive picture first. Everyone was talking in the previous rounds. Economy is growing very robustly and is expected to grow similar around 7% this year, last year 8.2%. I'm not sure how many people in the room know what was the agriculture growth rate last year? It was just 1.4%. Last 10 years that you asked, 3.7% is the average annual rate of growth of so-called Modi period 10 years, vis-a-vis 3.5% of 10 years of Manmohan Singh period. So broadly, agriculture has been growing at around 3.5, 3.6, 3.7% on an average. But there is a volatility, and that volatility is increasing because of climate change. The point, there was mentioned a lot that we need to increase demand to create demand for manufactured products. So how do we get the demand creation? And you refer to PM Kisan. Last 5 years it has remained constant, 6,000 rupees. In real terms, it has gone down by at least 25%, because that's 5 years inflation if you take care of that. So they have not been compensated even on direct. But let me give you one little statistics. The biggest ever survey of household consumption, the rural per capita monthly consumption expenditure is only 3,773, 3773 per capita monthly. Multiply it by an average size of the household, about 4.5, it comes to less than 17,000 rupees per month. This is 22-23 biggest survey. Add a bit of inflation, add whatever little savings if they have, it is broadly less than 20,000 rupees per month per household average. Now, Ajay Vir Jakhar would be at the upper end maybe as a farmer, but Bihar farmers would be even lower than this. So with that expenditure level, how much demand you can create for the industrial products? And this is a lesson that we need to learn from China. China did not start its reforms with industrial policy or trade policy or exchange rate correction. 78 to 84, they focused on agriculture, and they doubled in 6 years real incomes of the farmers. We dreamt of that when we said doubling of farmers' income, but actual achievement is about 45% of that target. So how do we do that? We can come into the second round.
That's a very important point, and please absorb these numbers. Less than 2.5 lakh per annum. That's the number that Professor Gulati has shared. At that level, and inflation, and that's why if you ever wondered why does a young man of 18 years, 16 years, 20 years in Bharat, in rural India, not want to work in farming sector, why do they chase very low paying jobs, very difficult jobs in our cities where costs of living are also so high? The answer is in what you said. I'll come to you, Ajay. Farmer income, because there's so much that has been said here. Farmer income to be doubled. If in 20 years we have just done around 3.5% average growth in agriculture sector, the other paradox is that government upon government has depressed farm output prices to keep inflation under check. The Reserve Bank of India gives a significant weight to food prices in calculating inflation. That affects interest rates. But no one, or we rarely talk about how inflation control is actually a punishment for our farmers. The economic survey said, please, it suggested that we should remove food from this interest rate calculation. Do you think that will make a difference?
In fact, I wrote on that exact subject in the Indian Express 10 days before the economic survey came that we should exclude it from the index. And I think so Gulati Sahab was in the board of RBI, he can explain that better. But I can give you an example of how it impacts farmers. For example, onions were in shortage last month, and there were export bans trying to subdue onion prices. So a family of 4 consumes around 15 kgs of onions a month, which means if you suppress the price by 20 rupees, each family saves around 300 rupees per month. But if you suppress the suppressed price of 20 rupees per kg a month, for 1 acre of, for an average farmer owning 2 acres of land and having a very average yield of 100 quintals per acre, his loss is 4 lakh rupees per acre. So the order of magnitude that the farmer suffers to help consumers, for help the government mitigate inflation is huge. And that's why the economic survey was right in saying that we must exclude food. And if the government, as a farmer, I say if the government wants to help consumers, it could look at DBT, it could look at food coupons, or as in the United States, they could compensate farmers when farmers make a loss because of government policy. That could be ban on export of rice, that could be ban on stockholding limits, that could be on imported food at less than MSP prices. So there's a lot that the government can do, but this is not the work of the Ministry of Finance. This is not the work of the budget, but this is the Agriculture Ministry has to, convince the other ministries and their bosses.
No, Ajay, I would say it's a call at the highest levels of government. Professor Gulati, this is not the first time this issue of middle class being kept happy for 300 rupees as a great example of onions that you gave versus a 4 lakh loss for a farmer, a onion farmer.
Small 2-acre farm.
Small 2-acre farm. Why isn't this listened to? And he was correct in pointing out, you've been RBI board member also.
Well, let me first have great sympathy with the policy makers. If the onion price goes up, there is uproar and there are governments that have fallen. Vajpayee government, and I had the privilege to work with Mr. Vajpayee. So the sensitivity of essential commodities. If today onion inflation is at 58%, potato inflation is at 58%, tomato inflation is at 26%. If you go in the market, tomato is selling at 100 rupees a kg, and every housewife in the middle and lower middle income is complaining about it. So that's where the votes are more. So politically, controlling prices, and even for the economy, controlling prices takes precedence on totally leaving it to the volatility. Now, having said that, on the RBI thing, we have been having discussion with the governor, we talked to them, gave a presentation that you are overestimating inflation because you are using the food weight of 2011 base, 45.9% food and beverages. Over time, as per Angel's law, the food weight has to decline and you haven't replaced that. So I gave him a presentation on that, you are unnecessary. Second thing, when you are giving wheat and rice free, why are you concerned with to 800 million and then you are trying to put brakes, export bans on wheat or rice? For whom? For you and me, who are buying everything at market prices? He gave the example of onion. Let me give you a bigger example. 13th of May 2022, India imposed suddenly a ban on wheat exports, fearing because of the Russia-Ukraine war that the prices will erupt. At that time, perhaps it justified. What was happening? In the market, when the wheat was coming, they found the market prices were hovering at 2,700 rupees per quintal. They started unloading. After 6 months of controls, they started unloading at 2,100, 2,200 from FCI stocks when it was costing them 28, 29 rupees. So it was a dumping. They brought it down so that they can procure more. We estimated that the loss to the wheat farmers in the country because of that policy of selling it below the economic cost of FCI was 40,000 crores. 40,000 crores the farmers of wheat lost because of this policy. Now, On one side, you have this situation of controlling wheat prices, rice prices, onion prices and all that. Then you give huge subsidies through inputs. Fertilizer subsidy, 1.64 lakh crores is in the budget. PM Kisaan, although it has, in real terms, it has come down 60,000 crores. So what you try to do is, one foot is on the brake, the other is on the accelerator. In India, the fertilizer prices has not been revised, urea prices for the last 12 years or so. And it's a disaster because overuse of urea, the plant is not consuming more than 35% of urea, the granular urea, rest is going in the environment, creating nitrous oxide, which is 273 times the carbon dioxide. So you are subsidizing for creating poison in the country, the greenhouse gas emissions. It is crying for reforms, but politically, overall, let me conclude on that you are putting price controls on outputs of many commodities, but you are giving input subsidies. What is the net result of this? We worked for 2 years on this and analyzed the policies of all the governments for the last 20 years, from 2000 to 2022. That report is on the website of OECD. First time OECD included India. Indian farmer is net taxed. Let me underline that. Despite the huge input subsidies, Indian farmers are net taxed because the brake is much harder on their output prices than the fueling that you are giving through input subsidies. When you net out the two, you find that Indian farmers, and in 2022, the net taxation hovers around 18 to 20%. So that's the level of taxation, more than perhaps many of the urban people pay.
I'm glad you said this because this is an eye-opening piece of data, because all of us here would assume that farmers are not taxed, and some in a moment of irrationality may also say that farmers should be taxed. But Ajay, I come to you. If this is what the government has been doing, and not the present government, this we have seen over decades now. Isn't the responsibility of reform also to some extent on the farming community? Because when we talk to people in government, they say, well, you know, you can't touch this, particularly after what happened in the recent round. So let it be. It's politically quite suicidal to talk about reforms with farmers.
So let me just first respond to tax farmers. The government of India cannot tax farmers because it's not constitutionally possible. Agriculture is a state subject. So, you know, this conversation keeps coming up, कि farmers pay income tax lagao, you got to change the constitution for that. It's not happening. So, and I'm happy about it. But coming to the point about, you know, you got to regain trust of the farming community. That's symbolic, and I think so that's what this government can do before the budget is passed. And that's the most important thing. Once the farmers are convinced that the government is working for them, which it is, I'm saying it is working for them, but it's unable to convince the farmers about it.
How should it regain
so
that
I'm
trust?
just saying it should have started by, so after the farm laws debacle, the government set up an MSP committee headed by a former secretary to the government of India, I mean a secretary of the Ministry of Agriculture, who was seen as one of the initiators of the farm laws. That committee has 2 members who we've put out on social media and said that they are front for the pesticide industry. You know, they're 2 members of this MSP committee, which has been referred to in the parliament yesterday also. So we said, as a symbolic gesture, you should say that we are disbanding this committee which farmers disapproved of. You know, so budget is not just about figures of balancing the balance sheet, but these are symbolic things the government should have done. I think the government should disband that committee, and as we both are agreeing on it, the government needs a farm policy. The United States, the EU, China, they periodically change farm policy every 5 years. I don't even know if anybody knows when India had the last farm policy, and I can take a bet that not one IS office in the Ministry of Agriculture has read when the last policy came out. They may not even have a copy. We tried to search for it yesterday on the web. It's not available on the Agriculture Ministry website also.
Professor Gulati, I want you to respond to this point about winning back trust of the farmers, and this is a larger political question as well. And I want to add to that. After the farm laws debacle, do you get the sense that the government has kind of lost interest or considering the sensitivity of the subject, doesn't want to burn its hands again. So it's just done what has been routinely done in many, many budgets for the sector.
You know, one starting point of that when Ajay said that agriculture is a state subject. Yes, it is a state subject in the constitution, then why centre is announcing MSP and why centre is giving fertilizer subsidy and why centre brought about the green revolution or the white revolution in this country. So it's a hybrid animal. Agriculture, yes, for certain things it's a state subject, but the trade policy, the MSP policy, the fertilizer policy is all being determined by the centre, and that's a huge, huge money. Okay? So we need to build trust between the centre and the states. In fact, I wrote a piece just before the budget that they need to announce on the lines of GST Council and Agri Council, two types. One is where agriculture ministers meet of the states to discuss what sort of pan-India reforms can be, implemented. And second is the Farmers Council. And from each state, two farmers, one owner cultivator and tenant cultivator, because nobody talks about tenant cultivator. PM Kisaan doesn't go to tenant cultivator. It is going only to the landholding people. They may be sitting in Canada or Australia, and 6,000 rupees doesn't mean anything to them, whereas the tenants are not counted there. Tenants cannot get institutional credit because they can't give the collateral, the land. So people have forgotten about the tenancy in this country, which is so oral. Government data hugely underestimates the tenancy. 17%, 18% they say, but it's not less than 25 to 30% at least. So we need to bring them into the organized structure so that they can get all the benefits. So that winning the trust, as Ajay said, I think you have to devise, and to me, it's on the lines of GST Council. If this government announces that, it will start getting back the trust. And then you can start the reform process once again.
Ajay, I think you wanted to...
I personally think that you cannot win the trust of the farmers by getting them into a council. I've sat in many of these councils and consultative committees. They give you chai, they give you biscuits, and they send you home. They don't even share minutes of the meeting with you. I've seen it in state governments, I've seen it in central government. Even in CACP, sir, they don't give you minutes after the meeting is over when farmers go for it. But what I really think is that it's a governance problem. At the heart of it, it is a governance problem. And we need to tackle, I think so, the ministry, the bureaucracy, there's a lot of incompetencies in the bureaucracy which need to be tackled. You know, like when,
but
let me just say this. You know, when people say ki aap farmers ko kya sikhate ho? So I said, as an advocacy organization for farmers, I'm not here to tell farmers what to farm. I'm here to tell those making policy how to make policy better. That's our job. Our policy, our work is not to tell farmers
But
how to
Ajay,
farm.
you know, the point that Professor Gulati made, I wasn't born when some of the most successful revolutions in our agriculture sector happened. It was the same bureaucracy. And I want to add to that, while we focus only on the center because this is a discussion on the union budget, states also bear a responsibility for the farming sector. All the land is in states. The center perhaps doesn't even...
I agree with you on that. So we agree with you on that. It's a problem. It's agriculture is a state subject. Ultimately, the state governments have to deliver, and states are going bankrupt. The way this nation, I mean, not the central government, but the way some of the states like Punjab, maybe Kerala, maybe Rajasthan, maybe some other states are going, they will not even have money to give this free electricity, free subsidies that they're giving. I don't foresee this happening for the after 5-7 years.
And Andhra, the white paper on Andhra reveals scary facts. Professor Gulati, please.
Now, you know, since we are here for budget discussions, you know, what we are talking are the broader issues in agriculture and the reforms. I would like to come down to some of the numbers so that we have a good feel and where are the big ticket items that can be reformed to make that expenditure much more effective to deliver. You look at, you said agriculture, Ministry of Agriculture is 1,32,000 crores. If you add animal husbandry, fishery, another 7,000-8,000 crores, 1,40,000 crores. Rural development, 1,80,000 crores. What is the biggest element? One good thing, rural housing, you know, PM Gramin
Awas Yojana.
Awas Yojana. That has been given, I think, 54,000 crores, which is a 70% jump from the revised estimate. 70%. That's with a view to create permanent structures of the people in the rural areas, which will create employment also. So let's count
And
that.
some amount of demand, at least for
I
material.
would go and say that even Manrega, 86,000 crores of Manrega in the Rural Development Ministry should also be put in housing construction so that jhuggies in this country become a history forever.
Very good point.
And that will create employment. This apprenticeship and interns and all that, the problem is the rural people don't have that type of skill, and skill formation is needed. But they want to also stay in the rural areas where
Are
they
you
went.
suggesting a part of this internship scheme for agriculture internship, for example, or some related?
Well, agriculture skills actually they have, because that's what they know.
Huh.
So they are in a way skilled people. But
So give a farmer's
But
son, give a
employment-
farmer's son 15,000 rupees, let him work
You know,
through 2 or 3
no, no,
seasons.
look at that.
Why only give it to corporates?
when we are talking of employment generation, and this budget overall focus is on growth and employment. That's what my feeling is. And of course, fiscal, balancing and cutting down. Now, agriculture is already engaging 45.8% of the labor force. 45.8% of the labor force, whereas its contribution to overall GDP is only 18%. Now, you cannot create more employment in agriculture. All the world over, development history says that people come out of agriculture. And the first place where they go is in the construction industry. So, rural construction, whether it is Gramin Sadak Yojana or all the agriculture markets need to be upgraded. We are running agriculture markets of 1950s infrastructure.
But Professor Gulati, that's the point, that in the last episode of the farm laws debacle or previous attempts to reform APMCs as well, it all just gets stuck politically. Many governments have burnt their hands. Ajay, it's not, I recall the last episode when Prime Minister Manmohan Singh wanted to do something to the fertilizer subsidy. He was shot down by the proposal was shot down by his own ministers.
No, it's the process of doing something. It's the process, the art is in the process of the consultation process. If you don't have a consultation process, if the bureaucracy is allowed to push down something down the throats of people, then people will react to it. And I think if the government had employed, so the farm laws were well intentioned by the government, but they were not well conceived, I would say.
So you think in Shivraj Singh Chauhan there can be a new consensus builder?
Yes, I think he would do a much better job, because after Sharad Pawar, I think so the first time we have an agriculture minister who has seniority within the party that he belongs to. And of course, he's got experience from Madhya Pradesh of increasing agriculture growth substantially. So I think he's the right man for the right job. But he's obviously burdened by the system that he lives in, which is the Ministry of Agriculture. And there is a saying that you don't get to achieve what you aspire to achieve, you get pulled down to the level of systems that exist.
We are almost out of time, Professor Gulati. Quick, short answer. There's a focus on agriculture research, but when I was reading up, I realized that much of the central allocation for agri research is actually being spent on salaries, pension, and admin. How should we reconcile that?
We should not confuse the scientists. First thing is they have to get salary to work on, right? So their salaries actually are also for their brains.
Should it be increased therefore?
Yes, that's what I'm saying. It's about 10,000 crores, which is 0.21% of the value of agriculture, the central allocation to ICAR, and in real terms it has gone down. Okay, it should be minimum, if you want to have a powerhouse of agriculture, which you can have, minimum 1% of the value of agri GDP should be on your R&D, because we have worked on this, our research, that the marginal rate of return, if you put 1,000 crores in agri R&D, you will get a return of 10,000 crores. It's more than 10 times. If you are not, and you are giving subsidies of 1,64,000 crores on fertilizer, my heavens, and food subsidy to 800 million people, when you are saying poverty is only 10%, 11%, we have lifted so many people, why are you giving free food? अरे एक चींटी भी चलती है तो वो अपना खाना लाइन लगा के खड़ा करती है. So everybody has to work to get food. 800 million people getting free food in this country, and that depresses all the markets for the farmers. People have to work. Yes, Antodaya people, those who are extremely poor, vulnerable, done. But Vajpayee formula was those who are in BPL above Antodaya, they should give 50% of the MSP, and those who are above APL people, above poverty line, they should give 90% of the MSP. That formula, if they bring, food and fertilizer is together in the new budget 3,70,000 crores. If you reform these two big ticket items, you can save 70,000 crores. I will write it here on the wall, but it needs a good preparation, it needs good communication, and then you can convince this 70,000 crores can be put into research and other infrastructure, and agriculture of this country will be flying, and we will be assured of food and nutritional security in the country.
Both my panelists have taught me that one of the key things that perhaps is required is a new deal from a communication and consultation point of view also. I know this session could have been extended much further, but we already have the panelists of the next one right here in the hall. So I'm going to thank Professor Gulati and Ajay Vir Jakhar for dissecting.
I just want to add something, because I'm on the stage, I want to use this opportunity, and there are officers here. I think what the government needs to do at the union government and at the states is document failures. And you got to get beneficiaries to document failures. That's what builds trust, that's what improves policy, that's what improves government. But the government does not document failures, it tells you success stories of one small thing and it extrapolates it to a bigger story. If you document failures, India will succeed. It doesn't need much sense. I mean, that's the whole idea that I get from the farm.
Here the good and the bad. Professor Gulati, Ajay Vir Jakhar, thank you very much for your time. With that, it's a wrap on this session. We'll be back with more. Thank you.